So I'm here with Ken from Ultimate Renewables. We've spent the last couple of hours looking at our air source heat pump, the dramas that are associated with that. I think a lot of you have actually followed our videos will know kind of the issues with our system. This is a very quick summary. The rads at the far end of the house, at the north end of the house, do not come to temperature. That I think is our biggest problem. Our COP is also something we're not hugely impressed with at 2.7. Obviously, everybody with a heat pump, COPs, everybody wants the highest possible number. Ken and I have gone around our system looking at the various bits and pieces that are associated with that. So my first question to you, Ken, what is good about our system?
It's very difficult to actually find some good parts about your system. I mean, where do I start? The installation as a whole is not too bad. I've seen worse. But we definitely have some trying to get too many kilowatts down too small a pipe situations.
When you say, we're struggling to get too many kilowatts down the pipe, what exactly does that mean?
When we specify pipe work to a house, say your house is 10 kilowatts, and we will pick a heat pump that will give us our 10 kilowatts, but the distribution of the system, say we need a couple of radiators that need 2 kilowatts in each room, we need to make sure that that pipe work is sized correctly to maintain and get those 2 kilowatts to that radiator.
Right.
So if the pipe is too small, the velocity tends to increase, and with that combined, it means that water cannot hold 2 kilowatts of energy, and so effectively that room won't warm up.
So in our case, we've got an 18 kilowatt heat pump, and the radiators at the far end of the house, which I think are at the end of the heating circuit, are struggling to come to temperature. Is that part of the reason?
Yes, it will be. And as we've discussed and played around this morning, the way the system has been set up and installed, unfortunately, we do have a incorrect pipe size from the outdoor to the indoor, and it goes through a buffer and goes through hydraulic separation. Maybe we'll come to that in a minute. But the majority of the flow that is then coming away from the buffer and going into the heating system is actually short cycling around your underfloor manifold. So we're getting maybe like a 70% of the flow and energy going to your manifold, and only 30-40% going to the actual radiators, which in turn it should be the other way around.
In our case, we've got a lot of underfloor heating, and we've seen that basically underfloor heating in our house actually heats these rooms a lot faster. Radiators are not as effective.
The proposed is to get rid of the junk. There's quite a few pumps on the system. The way the system is designed and the ingredients, unfortunately, that we are dealt with, there's not much we can do with the pipe work that is going to that system. But with some fine tuning and trying to get the system as open loop as possible, we do need to throttle back the underfloor, because that is taking the majority of the flow. So we need to distribute that flow into the weaker parts of the system, hence being the radiators, which is at the end of the building.
We've got 4 distribution pumps basically currently running in our system, which obviously isn't great. You think that once you create a proper open loop system, we could potentially get away with maybe 1, maybe 2?
Max 2. I'm hoping to do 1.
From my limited understanding, I just can't see buffer tanks being particularly effective in air source heat pump systems. I think Ken is pretty much of the same school of thought. But you did say something controversial to me a short while ago, thinking we might not necessarily bypass the buffer tank in our system, and you proposed a 3-valve or a 3-pipe buffer system. What exactly is that?
Yes, Mars. Unfortunately, because we have poor pipe work at the beginning of the system, and we're trying to get to the end of the building, we would call that the index circuit. Straight away, we're off to a bad start with the flow and energy we can get through that pipe work. If you're trying to get the heat pump and that one circulating pump to push the water and energy all the way to the end of the building, it's not going to do it. Hence why some systems use a buffer or separation. That's generally in the middle or in an early point of the system. That means the heat pump can easily get the water and energy to the buffer, and then the really restricted part, which is the heating system itself, we can only have to do the buffer to the index circuit, and that involves generally another pump, some fine tuning, maybe not a DT of 5, whereas the heat pump will always like to try and work on a DT of 5. But sometimes it is really hard to calculate. We will, and I will try and calculate if it can be done. If we can get it done in one pump, using one pump only, that's going to be brilliant. But I've got a feeling we're going to need two, and until I've actually done the math, we might need to do the buffer. Now we can do the buffer instead of a 4-pipe configuration. We can do a 3-pipe, which means you get less distortion. And distortion means you've got a DT of 5 going on one side, which is generally the heat pipe, the heat pump side, and then you've got a DT of maybe 10 on the heating side. So we've got a lot of mixing going on, flow return temperatures. So even though the heat pump might deliver, you're asking it to deliver 50 degrees, with the distortion coming out the other side of the buffer, you might only get 45. When in actual fact, you want 50 at your radiators because that's what you're asking for. You then have to run the heat pump a lot harder, and obviously the distortion increases, the energy cost and the money cost increase. So you're trying to like sticky plaster it by using a buffer or a separation.
So the 3-pipe would be more efficient than a 4-pipe buffer?
You'll get less distortion. You'll still get some distortion, but you'll get less distortion.
You also mentioned that there's the potential of converting the buffer into a volumizer.
If the design and the maths work out, then I'm going to use the existing buffer. It's got a buffer combination cylinder. I'm going to use the buffer as a volumizer to just have the general volume in the heat pump. Heat pumps like volume. It tends to smooth out the potential sort of cycling maybe in the early summer, early changeover months.
We've also spoken quite a bit about controls today. What are we going to do with our system?
Okay, the controls I've found a little interesting. We've got a pump, a post buffer pump that does the entirety of the circuit, but is only controlled by the underfloor heating. We've got another pump on the underfloor heating with a TMV that needs to go. We have a 3-port valve that I'm pretty sure isn't actually piped in correctly. We've got various zone valves everywhere. So we haven't, at the moment, haven't got totally, okay, forget the buffer, but we haven't got an open loop system really at all at the moment. We have got bottlenecks. We proved it, Miles, didn't we? We tried a little hot water cycle. Very quickly, the heating pump continued to run into the heating system, and after about 5 or 10 minutes, it was starting to pump cold water into the system. So it lost all its. It was starting to lose all its inertia of putting that energy into the system. I would have expected that pump to have shut down when it done a hot water cycle.
So how does one control that?
It's going to be some rejigging and some wiring. Maybe take a look inside the heat pump itself and seeing if there are relays or things that we can turn on by the controller that might help us.
I see. So we're going to still keep our thermostats for the underfloor heating. Those will still call for heat, or are we?
We could keep the stats and the actuators. We're not going to get the underfloor talking to the heat pump. The underfloor is not going to tell the heat pump what it's doing.
Okay.
There's no on and off control.
Okay.
I suggest we remove some of the actuators to majority of the main areas in the property.
Okay.
We could still leave the hallway, the cloakroom. That can still be controllable. Let's say we're going to try and make about 50% of the actual underfloor manifold fully open path. So when the heat pump actually comes in to do heating, it's always got a pathway of water to go. Same with the upstairs radiators and tower rails. We're gonna make them a little bit more open circuit, so a little bit more. I know you've got your smartphone and control.
Yeah.
We're going to play around with those a little bit, and I think we're going to try and use those a little bit more as trimming valves. And when I say trimming valves, we're going to set them a little bit higher than normal. We're going to try and dial in the Weber curve. Obviously, try and get the system running better than it ever did. But we're going to try and dial in the Weber curve, so it's the actual Weber curve of the heat pump that is going to manage the comfort level within the property. And then if there was any slight discrepancies in certain rooms that might be overheating, you can then trim that down with that TRV.
The other thing that I think is quite important, we're beginning to see a lot more of that, is balancing of rads, because I think even though you've got a system that's operating quite well, if the rads aren't balanced, it's still going to lead to instances where some rooms might be hotter, colder than others. So is it quite a poignant thing to say that all of the radiators should be balanced so that the system is as balanced as possible in terms of heat distribution.
Obviously, with your setup you've got here, we've got a lot of leaching of flow and energy going around the underfloor. So we haven't got the correct flow rate going to your heating at the moment.
Right.
Your radiators at the moment.
Yeah.
So this could be a primary cause of why certain radiators that are further away in the property are not quite getting the energy that they require. It is micro-bore, I must say, some of the pipe work I've seen. Until we change the system, so I know I'm getting as much flow into that heating system, radiator part of the heating system as I can, and it's not short cycling anywhere else, then I'm confident that we can try and then balance your system down. And when I say balancing, it's TRVs do not balance a heating system. You start by balancing the system by opening the TRV valve, or not even have the TRV valve head on, and basically you're trying to restrict the radiators that are nearest to the pump. You restrict them down, and as you go along the circuit, every radiator you open up a little bit more. So at the end of it, you are effectively getting the same temperature and the same flow rate through every radiator at the same time.
And how do you do that? So is it a matter of putting the probes?
Experience.
And for those of us that aren't, is it a matter of putting probes onto the two pipes that actually go in and out of the radiator and then balancing that out, getting a delta T there of some sort?
You could do that. You can use probes, but if all the valves are the same, then how many turns did it take to wind from fully closed to fully open?
Oh, I see. Okay.
In the same breath, you need to look at the size of the radiator. So let's say all the radiators were the same size. So you would do like 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. If the cloakroom radiator was a tiny postage stamp, that might only need to be open like 1 or 2%, because it's such a small radiator compared to the rest of the ones in the property. And vice versa. If there was one at the end of the circuit, which is the 2 kilowatt radiator that I was talking about earlier, for example, that balance valve and pipework should be designed, and that balance valve might be 90% open.
That's the lock shield valve.
That's the lock shield valve.
Open 90%.
90%.
Okay.
Because it's such a large radiator, it needs the power in the water, the energy in the water at a certain velocity to get the output of that radiator.
So is balancing something you always do on a system? Because when we had the system handed over to us, there was no balancing of rads that were done. Is that something that should be done?
Yes, absolutely. Oil, gas, heat pumps, they should all be balanced.
So as soon as a new system is put in, irrespective of what it is,
yes,
rads have to get balanced.
Yes, absolutely.
And is there such a thing as underfloor balancing, underfloor heating balancing?
Absolutely same again. So you might have 10 loops of underfloor. The longest loops would need more flow to get the energy. If you've got 10 loops on an underfloor, and say the average needed 2 litres a loop, then obviously you need to hit that manifold with 20 litres. If you're only hitting it with 10 litres, because your pipework's not correct, or your pump's not correct, you're not going to get the recommended flow rate necessarily with that underfloor.
So the one thing that we're seeing an awful lot of on the Renewable Heating Hub forums is that there's a lot of botched systems out there. How would you grade the bodginess of our system? How badly bodged is it?
It is unfortunately not been designed well. It looks like the system was designed for a DT of 20, an old oil gas boiler system. There was no thinking future-proof in thinking low temperature thinking at all. The installation of the heat pump and conversion has not been done that great.
The one thing that I've definitely learned since speaking to professionals like yourselves is that there is an awful lot of houses in the UK that have got oil and gas boilers, and the plumbing has been designed for those. But that's not to say that you can't still put a heat pump in effectively and efficiently to work in that system. It just requires the design. And now when I actually play back through all the conversations when the original installers came here, there really wasn't any design. They didn't take anything into account. They literally, for me, came in and said, okay, here we've got an oil boiler system. What we're going to do is now we're going to put a low temperature heat pump in here, and just plug it in and let's hope that it actually heats the house. Which is why they left us on a set flow temperature of 45 degrees, just so that the house felt quite warm. So from your perspective, when you go into houses like ours, like people that have got gas or oil boilers, what goes through your head in terms of how should I design this so that a heat pump can run effectively on what's there already?
Let's take a house that's got poor pipework, poor heat system. It's been running on DT20 on oil or gas for years, and it's not quite how you would like it. You could do a couple of things. You could fit a separation, so then we're back to the distortion and the heat pumps running over time to try and distribute energy into that poor heat system. You can upgrade, oversize the pipework from the heat pump to gain you pressure. If the maths don't work, if you can put it into a calculator, that may not work. You are then down to a separation, or you need to start changing some of the pipework. You can play around with the flow temperature a little bit. It's the pipework. You can fudge it all you like, but if the pipework of the heating system, if you can't design it out or you can't change it, then there's not much else you can do. If you've got a totally blank canvas, then it's relatively easy. We are going to make efficiency gains, and I hope it really does make superior efficiency gains.
I do tend to think that efficiency is one thing. Everybody loves to talk about COP, and I've got a 5 and a 6 and a 7.
Yes.
That's one thing. I mean, it's pretty cool, but that's not the be all and end all.
No.
At the end of the day, you want to have comfort in the house. For us, I can live with the 2.8 that we've got, provided that we can still get the required heat that we need at the far end of the house. And I think that's kind of the balancing act that you need to get to. But our objective really is just to try and get more uniform heating throughout the house.
And I'm in that corner as well. Sometimes chasing the COP, Scott, is all well and good. And yes, you could have the most efficient system in the world with, you've just built a brand new house.
Yeah.
No one really talks about sort of running costs too much,
Yeah.
Every house, every plumbing has got a different set of ingredients. My house, your house, is not going to be performing and getting super efficient scop and cop and costing you peanuts to run compared to a brand new build. That is a good bar to aim for, and as you said, trying to aim for efficiency is good. In your case, we are limited. We are limited by bottlenecks and brick walls within the system. I do think we can hopefully get you nearer to the 4 figure, 3.5 to 4s, and at the same time get that, which you haven't been getting, is that more uniform comfort around the house. So
we're at 2.7. You're saying, okay, we can try and aim for 4s. What exactly happens in that equation? Is it a matter of using less electricity and generating more heat? Or is it still using the same amount of electricity and just generating more heat?
But a bit of all of it, really. So I think if we can get your distribution of your heat is poor. Your heat pump's producing the heat, but it's not going where it should be going. It's going to the wrong places and short cycling on itself. So it's almost like going around in circles. So if we can get rid of the waffle of over-engineered zone valves and pumps and etc., and make it that more open loop system, we can get it delivering more into the property better, which means hopefully we can decrease the flow temperature, which in turn will increase your COP, your running cost, and as I say, your overall comfort. By getting the distribution right, which is down to the system again, it's down to the actual heating system, not the heat pump. The heat pump's doing what it's told, but it's the distribution of what it's delivering is the key to the system. So if we can get that distribution out a little bit more, I think the heat pump will take a bit of a sigh of relief and back off a little bit.
So we've played and tinkered with a lot of stuff today. Where do we go from here?
I'm going to have to go and do some maths. I've had a good look around the system. Obviously, I haven't taken up floorboards and stuff. I've been playing around with shutting off different parts of the circuit and seeing what DT I'm getting, how much distortion I'm getting across the buffer, playing around with some pump speeds, just seeing how the system responds. Very quickly we discovered, there's some fundamental installation issues anyway. Based on a worst case, try and work out my index circuit and whether the pumps that we've got, because they're good pumps, they're quite heavy duty pumps, if we can utilise one of those and run the system with one of those, great. But I need to work out the math now to see if that is possible. As I said, we're bottlenecked from the heat pump to the inside, and from the inside to the rest of the heating system. We've got bottlenecks everywhere, so it is going to be very tight. I'm hoping we won't have to use a form of separation, but I'm on the fence at the moment. It's very difficult. I'd love to do open loop. I don't want to put another pump. I don't want to put more pumps on. I want to take pumps away because pumps are energy as well.
Yeah, they definitely are. I don't think a lot of people realize that, and I certainly didn't. The installers come through and they go, yeah, no, we'll just put another pump in. It's like, okay, fantastic, it's going to work. But then, you start adding 1 pump, 2 pumps, 3 pumps, 4 pumps. They all cost money to run.
Well, it could be like 80 to 100 watts an hour.
We've actually got a pump on our home sewage treatment plant, which runs at 100 watts, and that has to run 24/7, 365 days a year. And I know that tallies up to a couple £100 a year.
Yeah, it will do. Yeah, so if you've got 4 or 5 of those on the system, we definitely don't need them. We can pull them.
Well, thanks very much for coming through, Ken. So we are going to hopefully schedule the work at some point in the future. We're going to write down all the numbers. We're going to keep up all the tallies. We're going to be able to, have a real before and after scenario.
Yep.
And hopefully, well, goodness, if we could get up to 4 as a cop for us, that would be incredible.
Indeed. I'm going to put some money on the table now.
Wow.
There you go.
Bold. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. Bye-bye.